Hello, friends. My name is Mark Weir. I am the president of the Dakota Conference, and I am very grateful for the opportunity to have this chance to speak to you via this medium on camera about an issue that's very important to me personally, but even more so to our entire conference family. This was a suggestion that came out of our first town hall meeting, that we make this available via video because not everyone could be there. And so that's why we're doing this at this time. I want to share with you a little bit of what I understand and what I know, because a very key part of what the Dakota Conference reality is our school, Dakota Conference Academy. And as a part of that, I'm not native to here, but I ask and I want to hear from people who have been here. There's a long and very, very great history when it comes to Christian education in the Dakotas. From SRA to DAA, and even prior to that, we have a heritage we should be proud of. But I've been told stories about the day that came when there was this decision to close Cheyenne River and open Dakota Adventist Academy. Some thought it was a good idea, some thought it was a bad idea. It doesn't make a difference. That's a long time ago. But when the school opened, there was a lot of hope and promise, but there were also some challenges. So much so that just a few years later, the school had to close. I was pastoring in Minnesota when that happened, and I recall being there when suddenly there was an influx of students coming to Maplewood that weren't anticipated because of a decision here in the Dakotas. But this conference family rallied together and a year later reopened. And as a result of that, we've continued to operate and provide for our kids when it comes to Christian education at the high school level. Every December, there has been this event called Celebration of Praise. It has happened annually. And the reason for that is a reminder that we must celebrate what God has done, and we give Him praise for what He has done, and that we have continued to be able to function and operate to this day. The dedication, the faithfulness, the generosity of our people through the years is exemplary. And I want to thank you for that. But there are some things that are different in 2022 than they have been in the past. Some of those are the size of our families. My wife went to Maplewood Academy. When she attended, 3 to 5 kids was the normal family size for all those family farms. And every one of those kids, they're going to the academy. Much the same was here in the Dakotas. But that's not the case today. Family size is smaller, the number of potential students has decreased, and we also are finding that there are a number of families who are really hesitant to send their sons and daughters away to a boarding school at distance. I've also heard through the years stories of how things should have been or things that were done in ways that were uncomfortable. I myself spent 10 years on an academy campus as chaplain Bible teacher. I heard those stories too about things at that school that happened in the past. But this isn't the past, this is today. And yes, sometimes mistakes are made, and we will never overlook them or try to bury them or hide them. But as we have looked at the last several years, the perception amongst both the students and the parents has been incredibly positive. There's a lot of questions about whether school is relevant in the world we live in. Why a boarding school? A couple of years ago, there was a family that expressed interest in having their child attend, but they didn't know if they could afford this. Money was found and the family was contacted, and then they said, well, it's not about the money, it's something else. And they began to make excuse after excuse after excuse. But here's what I want to say. While I don't teach at the school, I try to spend time out there. I interact with the students, I talk with the staff. There are a lot of wonderful things happening at the school this year. Just a few weeks ago, the student body was heading up to a outdoor week that they're going to be involved with. But on the way, well, how about we stop at a church and be involved with the service? And okay, that's a good idea. But how about if our kids are involved? Well, that's also a great idea. And then one of the students, well, I'm willing to speak for that. And out of that reality is a realization that there are a number of students who want to be involved, not just on campus, but across our conference with a sharing of faith and values. Ministry that happens, service that happens, there are a lot of wonderful things. A dedicated staff, and people that I'm proud of to call a part of the Dakota pastoral team. We need to find ways to make sure our school can continue, and that's why this video is being produced. One of the things about our conference and our people that I just find amazing is the dedicated, generous nature of so many of our church members. When we think about our school and the commitment to helping, it's been a partnership with so many of our people in so many places. Our alumni have regularly given generously and significantly. 2 years ago, there was a gift of $400,000 that came at a very opportune time to help us to continue to move forward when we weren't sure how things were going to happen. And as far as our alumni, over $4.5 million has come in the last 10 years to help with the needs at our school, from either worthy student or just the alumni annual fund, which is significant when it comes to operations, dorm renovation, other things. There is a generous nature to our people. When we think about the needs in our school, the ability to fund effectively and care for responsibilities is a key part of this. Approximately $200,000 a year has come in annually to help with ongoing operations. Basically, it goes into the school budget to help make sure we're continuing to move forward. But we do have some challenges that we're finding as I have been looking and searching and the team of people around me. One of those challenges is that we've had concern from the IRS. They have a issue that we're trying to work through, where they have found some things that have happened in the past that we're working through. We have other challenges. The inability for our school to cover their insurance, and so the conference has been paying for that for the last several years. There's also some feeling that I hear that if kids just show up, money will also show up from somewhere. And collecting of tuition has become challenging in some regards. Heard a story, it's many, many years ago where this happened, but the debt is still on the books, where a family has incurred $90,000 in bad debt to the school for a number of students who came for a number of years and was never collected. If I sign an obligation, that's my responsibility. But if I believe someone else will care for that, I can take that responsibility lightly. And we have encountered some of that, which contributes to our overall challenge, because as we look at how we proceed forward, we have to be able to fund what we say we value. I want to commend our current principal, Anthony Ocherek, who worked very hard to make sure that we did better with this last year. Now, you're never going to collect 100% of the tuition. I know that as a pastor, local church schools, but you need to be doing as close to that as possible. But there's still tens of thousands of dollars of uncollected tuition just from last year. Because of this tight budget operational need, the school struggles to meet some of the maintenance needs and other needs, and they're doing their best, but there have been some challenges. We have struggled to have clear financial picture for the last several years and have not had a clean audit for many years. And the conference for many, many years was able to cover that shortfall, no questions asked. But as has been demonstrated with the financial picture, as a result of that, we've been draining our reserves to the point where we don't have many more to give unless we make some very difficult decisions at a conference level. These conversations have been happening with our K-12 board especially, and our finance committee. And I want to commend our finance committee chair, Robin Wise, because for 2 years, this group has been looking, searching, seeking, how do we care for what is to make sure we have a future moving forward? And as a result of that, we've had joint meeting with our executive committee. The last several executive committees, we've been talking about this because my goal is to have a school for not just this year's children, but next year's children and grandchildren in the future. But that will not happen by accident. One of the things we want to share with you is how we go about funding our academy. And this is a key concern because anything that we do as a conference, as a local church, as a school, even in my own home, how do we make sure we can afford this and pay for this? There are three main sources when it comes to funding for our school. The first one comes from the conference itself. Just like a local church will have a school line item on their local church budget, at least that's been my experience in all the places I've pastored, we as a conference have a line item that is school subsidy that goes to the academy. For this year, we have increased that because we have an ongoing commitment to our school. Right now, $540,000 is coming from our conference to support our school. That's about 10% of all the tithe that is received in the conference. This is one of the highest commitment levels of a conference all across North America. We are committed to our school. Then there's tuition. With our current number of students this year, we'd again, if everything was collected, be a little over $500,000. But we never get 100%, and so there's going to be a little bit of gap there. But that's still another key component of our funding. Those two together are more than half of all the operational needs for the school. In addition to that, there's development giving, plus some other funds that come in. And as we put together a budget with everything that we know, the circle of faith giving, all the other types of resources that could come in, we are still running $363,000 in operations for this year. That's our shortfall. Now, I've been saying for quite some time that I want to make sure this year is the best year we can make it to be. But can I guarantee down the road? I can't guarantee what we can't deliver on. And even though we are looking at a shortfall, we're doing everything in our power to address that shortfall. Historically, that's been the conference writing a check to cover the difference. Because we've done that for many, 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 many years, we don't have a lot to offer. And as already been shared, when we realize that other funds that have come into the conference that aren't designated in a certain way have diminished dramatically in the last 6 years. Our ability to have a different pool of resources to draw from has been severely impacted. To make sure that we're giving the opportunity for our constituency to understand as clearly as possible the full picture of what's going on, I've asked Mark Seibold to share some of the financial history of our conference and the things that have been happening over the last 10 years when it comes to our financial health and strength.
Thanks for joining us for this Town Hall video presentation. I'm Mark Seibold, Treasurer for Dakota Conference. In this section, I'm going to focus on three relevant aspects surrounding the conference finances, particularly in the context of helping fund Dakota Adventist Academy. These three are giving trends, conference reserves, and conference financial support for our academy. Let's get started. First of all, we're going to take a look at Dakota Conference giving trends. And when people think about giving, they naturally think about tithes because that's the largest single category of giving in the church. In this first slide, we're going to take a look back 10 years, and we can see that over these years, there's been ups and downs, but it's reasonably consistent. This is remarkable in fact that we have lost some membership over this time. But in 2021, our average did exceed the 10-year average. And of course, we're glad to see that. In the next slide is a year-to-date slide. August year-to-date, 2013 through 2022. And we can see that in 2022, we've dropped below the average year-to-date. However, it's important to remember that the biggest tithe month is December. A lot of people wait until then to turn in their tithes. And so we can't always gauge what our year-to-date is going to be by this point in the year. But it does serve as an illustration that we are not quite keeping up this year. Sometimes it has to do with when churches turn in their reports. And that may be true here. They miss it 1 month and then they turn into the next month. There's deadlines for these things. Now, something that people often don't think about when they're giving is non-tithe income. And in this slide, you can see that the non-tithe income peaked out in 2016 and has been on the decline ever since. This has taken away some of our flexibility in funding. One of the things that people don't often know is that a lot of non-tithe income, at least back 5-6 years ago, was from mineral rights that the conference has, specifically oil royalties. There are other donations that are given that go into this category as well, but in general, we are seeing a pretty serious decline since 2016. In this section, I'm going to talk briefly about Dakota Conference reserves. Reserves are those set-aside funds, either in cash or investments, that we use for backup when times are lean, just as you do in your household. On the chart in front of you now is a very important aspect of our conference finances, percentage of recommended working capital. What this means, it's a reflection of the percentage of conference reserves as compared to NAD policy. Now, earlier this year, they changed how they measure that policy, and I'll be covering that in just a moment. But you can see in the right-hand column that the percentage of recommended working capital has declined pretty seriously in the last 10 years. And there's been a variety of impacts on that, not just giving, but also the expenditures that we've had to have. And I'll be covering that shortly. But in the second to the right-hand column, you can see the actual working capital numbers correspond with those percentages, of course, and they have really dropped substantially. Our available cash is down. I want to point out that the numbers on the bottom are year-to-date as of June 22. That's the last closed month that we have at this current moment. And so another thing to keep in mind is that because of the way the numbers are measured in the accounting system, they probably look a little more serious than they really are, but they have declined. There's no doubt about that. And so to drop from roughly 6 million actual working capital in 21 at the end of the year to 343,000 at the end of June, it looks pretty serious. But again, partly that's how that's measured. And as we adopt the new North American division policies into our numbers, that will be adjusted as well. Moving on to our next slide is a chart that shows the general trend of working capital. Working capital is really a prime measurement, as I mentioned. And the last year up and through the first quarter of this year, it's been pretty stable under the old measurement at mid-60s. That means 60-some% of what we should have on hand is what we have, as measured by the previous standards of policy. And so that's been pretty good over the past year and a quarter. But we will be adopting the new numbers, and then we'll be able to get accustomed to those as well. But for now, our working capital is reasonably stable, if not within policy. One of the things that's really important to note is an event that happened in 2020. There were actually 3 things that happened. The major one for the conference was PPP funds. These were COVID-related funds for businesses that were affected by the pandemic. And the conference received $625,000. That gave us some breathing room that year. Along with some funds the Academy received, about $200,000 in PPP funds and just over $400,000 in an estate bequest, gave the conference some breathing room in our subsidy to the Academy, so we were able to get somewhat caught up or at least relieved in our ability to put aside reserves. Finally, an important note that I'd like to present to you is that during these last couple of years, we've had an unexpected impact on our expenses, and that's payroll. From the end of 2018 through the end of 2021, payroll dropped substantially year over year. While we are currently filling positions that were vacated due to attrition, it's a two-way street. Yes, the conference saved on payroll funds, which allowed us to have some alleviation in payroll and expense pressure. However, we did not have our pastors out in the field promoting the mission that this conference is all about. And so you could look at that as a silver lining or a major problem in promoting our mission, but either way, there was a cost to it in how we promoted the gospel in Dakota Conference. In this last section, I'm going to briefly cover the Dakota Conference commitment to our academy. In the chart on the screen, you can see that we have had a substantial commitment over the years to our academy. The academy is iconic in our conference. It's our reference point for many things. And so we all love the academy. We want to see it succeed. And the conference has played a very big role in making sure that the academy is funded. We have not had to borrow any money, and that's huge because in some places they do borrow money to cover operations. In the chart that you see, you can tell that in the first two columns from 2012 through current, we have had regular subsidy and special subsidy. In 2020, those were essentially combined, and we brought the academy up to date to the tune of $1.2 million, a huge impact on the conference budget. As I mentioned, during that same year, we received an estate bequest of $400,000, PPP funds of $625,000, and the academy received about $200,000 in those same PPP funds, which really gave us a chance to breathe. We were able to reduce the subsidy to the academy while those other funds were being used for operations. Typically, a bequest would be given into categories such as endowments and school improvements. And I know that the administration at the academy would have loved to use some of that money for school improvements, but the K-12 board saw the need to give the conference a bit of a break. And so that's exactly what happened. It was voted, and those $400,000 were ported into operations. So our previous year of almost 2 million dropped down to 480,000, and it did have the intended effect, gave us some breathing room financially, an impact on the budget and the reserves. 2022, however, have had a bit of a change here. We have budgeted in a certain amount for the academy operations, but in addition to the budget, as you can see, there's been another special subsidy, new after a few years. $205,000 were made by special requests, were paid to the academy for a total subsidy this year of $535,000 as of the end of August. Against current tithe year to date, that's about 17% of tithe. And as you can see, and you recall from the previous chart, that non-tithe income is down substantially. So the impact on the conference subsidizing the academy is substantial. And we just need to be able to say, what is our mission? The academy is our mission. Pastoral leadership out in the field is also our mission. And these are the kinds of issues that we grapple with when it comes to limited funds, limited resources. We've just looked at a slide that compares our subsidies against tithe. And the reason we do that is because it is kind of a standard that we can use. All conferences get tithe. And when I thought about this a couple of years ago, I did a poll of some of our other conferences that had boarding schools. The next slide that you see shows some of those percentages. How much are these other conferences spending on subsidy for their schools in comparison to their tithe income? And you can see that there's a range there from almost 3% up to 10%. And then there's Dakota. Over the years, we're ranging from 2019 from anywhere from almost 20%, 23%. During our 2021 lower subsidy year, it was down to 8.68%. And year to date, we're at almost 17%. So this illustrates that your conference has been very generous in supporting Dakota Adventist Academy. As mentioned, we have an iconic school. This is an institution that has many years of history in Dakota, and it represents camp meeting, it represents alumni, and most of all, it represents an educational mission for our young people. I hope that some of these numbers help you understand the challenges that your conference has in funding all of our other missions, our pastoral missions, our evangelical missions, our teaching missions, and supporting our school as well. We are intent on finding a path forward, a path that can endure to keep our academy open. As you can see, the challenges are there, however. And again, I hope that this has been useful in illustrating what those challenges are. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and have a blessed day. Thank you.
I've also asked Mark Petrowski, our VP for Administration, who's also been very involved with education since he's been here, to kind of highlight what's been happening when it comes to the trends with enrollment and other academy concerns, the number of students who come from our conference, the good things with our student body. And so I'm going to turn the time over to him.
It's a privilege for me to speak to you about the rich heritage of Adventist Christian education in the Dakota Conference. It spans over quite a lot of decades, and I wanted to share with you in this segment some of the enrollment trends as we have experienced them, and taking some from the past and now having a little closer look at enrollment trends for Dakota Adventist Academy. The first school was at Elk Point. Those who know the history know the significance of that. And there were two academies at one time. There was Plainview Academy in South Dakota, and also Cheyenne River Academy here in North Dakota. The present campus here just outside of Bismarck is where this complex was built, and basically the high school aspect, or the high school program of Christian education was rebirthed here at DAA. The first slide that I'd like to show you figures are those relating to an interesting occurrence. At one time, the school closed, and that was over the 1987-88 school year, reopening the following year. But you will notice that the years prior to that, and this is taken from the enrollment of Cheyenne River Academy, all the way from 1944 through to 1987, there was an average attendance of 112 precious students. Then the school closed for a year, and then in 1988, reopening again for the 1988-89 school year. And you will notice from that point onwards, up until today, taken from that point, there's an average of 57 students. So a marked difference before the school closed for that 1 year, and then after it had opened here in Bismarck. And I feel that that is something that is important for our people to realize and to recognize as we talk about the enrollment trends. In the next slide, we want to show you a little bit more closer the rate or the enrollment, rather, figures for the last 6 years. We've included also this year because our school has just begun here a few months ago. So there you have the years from 2017-18 school year up until the opening of our current school year, 2022-23. And then the following slide will give you, again, a little wider view, a bird's eye view, so to speak, of the enrollment from the year 2000 through until the current year. And that brings the average from 53 to 51. And there you have, year by year, the enrollment numbers for those years. On a specific point, on a specific topic, we also want to just recognize the graduates that came from DAA. And in the last 6 years, you will find there our wonderful classes that we've had, and students who have gone on to universities, other vocations, places, to make a wonderful difference for the Lord Jesus. In the next diagram, you will find the breakup, or rather the mixture of students from the different regions within the Dakota Conference. The amber indicates students who come from our churches located in North Dakota, state of North Dakota. The ones in the blue from South Dakota. You will find that speaking about different numbers and different concentrations, we have a greater concentration of churches in North Dakota. And so hence we have more students coming as well. But what is encouraging about this diagram and this graph is that over the last couple of years, we have had a greater or slow growth in support from within our conference for our academy. And that is very, very encouraging. And then last two graphs that I wanted to share with you here is a very special aspect of our work at Dakota Adventist Academy, and that's the missional aspect, if you may. We have students who come from a non-Adventist background. I think there's a very nice balance between that and students who are from an Adventist background. And many of the students go on to make a decision for the Lord Jesus Christ and for His Word, and make a decision for the precious message that we have in our church. And there you have just an indication of some of those baptisms in amber, and again the number of students you will find there in blue. Then the last graph gives you just the numbers generally of students who come from either non-Adventist backgrounds, homes, or parents who identify themselves as not attending our church any longer, still willing to send their children to be at Dakota Adventist Academy to receive a wonderful education within our philosophy, our view of world history, our worldview, and the principles rather of the scriptures and the spirit of prophecy. It is always a delight and a privilege for me to attend our campus and to be there in person and to see God at work through our staff, through our teachers, and seeing the lives that are transformed at Dakota Adventist Academy.
One of the things we want to share is how we're trying to find a path forward. That's my goal. And as we share this with our constituency, that is what I want us all to focus on, a path forward moving into the future. In an effort to try to discover what is, we've done a couple of surveys. There was one that we did that was sent to over 3,500 people. This would be our entire mailing list. This would be our alumni list. We sent this out and then asked, share with us. What are your concerns? What are you hearing? What do you know? What would you like to know more about? There were a number of questions. And when we got those results back, there was only 39 people that bothered to respond. We sent it again. We got a few more responses. And if we're trying to find out how best to move forward, it's good to hear from our constituency, from our people. And again, I would love to hear what it is you think, what it is you wonder about, how we can do things better, because it's for our kids and our conference future. We've done another one in the last little bit, and we'll be looking down and looking at the results of that survey here in the next little bit. About 100 people responded. Again, not a large number, but we are going to take all those responses very seriously, look at them very carefully, to hear what people actually have to say. A year ago, I made phone calls to as many of the families as we could find that had academy-age kids to ask them, hey, let's talk about what would it look like? What would it take? What are your concerns? What would be necessary to even consider enrolling your son and daughter at our school? I only spoke with about 20 to 25% of the people, and the rest wouldn't even return my phone call. I don't know why that is, but if we are unwilling to at least engage in a conversation, it makes us hard to know how to proceed forward. How do we have a future that's meaningful for all of us if we can't enter into dialogue? We've hired a couple of consultants. One a year ago who has spent his career in this world exclusively in the business sector. He did a lot of good things for us. Revamped our website, created some promotional videos, some material to share, and sent extensively to the greater Bismarck area for every family within a 50-mile circle who had high school age kids. Here's something to consider. Here's what's being offered. And we got a few students who attended as a result of that. But from our own community, very few people responded at all. We've hired another consultant who focuses exclusively on Adventist schools and reaching Adventist families. We're working with that individual, hoping to find out how we can be more effective in what we offer at our school. But at the end of the day, with all that's happened, we still don't have an enrollment that is what we think it needs to be sustainable. There's still additional funds that are necessary. One thing that we launched is what I've called a circle of faith. This is a circle of people who are faithful and dedicated, who will be giving above and beyond what they normally give. And that's the key point. I have to give above and beyond because I give to my local church. I give to various things. If I take from those to give to the school, then I'm robbing others of what they need to fund and function. That's why it's above and beyond. I asked each member of our K-12 board and our executive committee what they could do. And that group was about $25,000 that they would do annually for the next 3 to 5 years. Because we can't forever continue to call on people to give and give and give. We have to have a plan that's going to work down the road. And then we took that to a broad range of constituents at camp meeting. And about another $100,000 was promised and pledged annually for the next 3 to 5 years to make sure our path forward is sustainable. But even with all of that, we're still running $363,000 short. We need additional funds, that's for sure. We also need additional students. And as we are looking to move forward, it's really upon our shoulders. Dakota Adventist Academy is our school. Dakota Adventist Academy was done for our students. Dakota Adventist Academy is a place where kids, in fellowship with one another, with a concerned and caring group of staff members, have the chance to learn and grow, share, be involved with mission and service. There are a lot of wonderful things about Dakota Adventist Academy. But it's on our shoulders and our hearts and our hands and our pockets as far as what we want to do moving forward. My wish, my dream, We have a school for our kids and our grandkids, but that can't be my wish alone. If our school is going to have a future, it means that our family, the wider conference family, has to realize the value and be a part of the solution. And I ask you to prayerfully consider joining, partnering, encouraging, praying for our school and our future.